The 1960s were not just a bridge between the black and white gothic chills of the past and the raw shocks of the 70s, they were a creative laboratory. Filmmakers were experimenting with bold ideas, strange atmospheres, and story twists that still echo through horror today. But a lot of these gems slipped into the shadows. How many of these pioneering nightmares have you actually seen? Let's dig up 13 forgotten 60s horror films that planted the seeds for scares we still love, some in ways you'd never expect. The Flesh and the Fiends, 1960. Some horror films ease you in gently. This one grabs you by the collar and shoves you face first into the cobblestone streets of Edinburgh during the early 1800s. The Flesh and the Fiends takes its inspiration straight from the real-life Burke and Hare murders, and it's every bit as grim as it sounds. Peter Cushing plays Dr. Robert Knox, a driven but morally conflicted surgeon desperate for fresh cadavers to further his research. Donald Pleasance, in one of his earlier screen roles, shows up as one of the body snatchers feeding this dark enterprise. What makes it stick is how far ahead of its time it felt. This isn't the polite drawing room gothic horror Hammer was known for. It's gritty, confrontational, and disturbingly realistic. The city feels alive and filthy, filled with pubs where whispers of murder get traded like gossip. The killing scenes are more matter-of-fact than theatrical, which actually makes them more unsettling. You get the sense you're watching something you weren't meant to see. Modern horror has mined this vein countless times. The idea of desperate people doing unthinkable things in the name of science is a direct ancestor to films like Reanimator or even Frankenstein's Army. You can also see shades of this in gritty 70s true crime thrillers, where morality is a slippery thing. For a film over 60 years old, The Flesh and the Fiends still has teeth. It shows the monster isn't always supernatural. Sometimes it's a well-dressed man with a medical degree who justifies the unthinkable. That's a lesson modern horror keeps revisiting, and it started here with a scalpel and a coin purse. The City of the Dead, 1960. Before Stephen King gave us Salem's Lot, and before Silent Hill drenched us in fog and dread, there was The City of the Dead. Also released under the more on-the-nose title Horror Hotel, this British chiller is pure atmosphere from frame one. A young college student, played by Venetia Stevenson, heads to a sleepy New England town for research on witchcraft. The locals are polite, but too polite. The fog never lifts, and the innkeeper, played with icy perfection by Patricia Jessel, seems a little too interested in her plans. Director John Llewellyn Moxey crafts an environment that's basically a horror character in itself. Streets are swallowed in thick, unbroken mist. Shadows dance on old wood-paneled walls. Even the sound design works over time. Footsteps echo for too long. Doors creak just a little too slow. And then there's the gut punch. The film makes a bold narrative swerve halfway through, killing off who you assumed was the main character. It's a trick Hitchcock had just pulled with Psycho, but here it's tied to something older, darker, and rooted in the town's cursed past. If you've played Silent Hill, watched The Fog, or enjoyed any horror story about strangers trapped in an unfriendly town, you owe a nod to The City of the Dead. Its pacing is deliberate, its reveals are sharp, and its ending sticks like damp chill in your clothes. This is the kind of horror that doesn't need to run at you screaming. It stands perfectly still, smiling, waiting for you to realize you're already surrounded. Peeping Tom, 1960. If Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho was the shot heard round the horror world, Peeping Tom was the bomb that went off in its own backyard. Directed by Michael Powell, a filmmaker once celebrated for lush, technicolor dramas, this psychological thriller centers on Mark Lewis, a shy, soft-spoken cameraman who has a horrifying hobby. He films women at the exact moment they die. The film's genius, and the reason it scandalized critics, lies in its uncomfortable honesty about voyeurism. The camera isn't just a prop, it's a weapon. Mark has a sharpened spike hidden inside his tripod, making his victim's final moments part of his personal movie. You're not just watching horror, you're implicated in it. The lens becomes a mirror. When it came out, critics tore it apart, calling it sick and perverse. Powell's career never recovered, but time has been kinder. Today, you can see its fingerprints all over slasher cinema, from the killer's POV shots in Halloween, to the meta-commentary of Scream, to found footage horror like Paranormal Activity. Every time a horror film makes you question your role as a viewer, It's walking in Peeping Tom's shadow. It's not an easy watch. Mark is both disturbing and tragically sympathetic. His trauma etched into every frame. The movie forces you to sit with that discomfort. The willingness to make the audience squirm rather than scream is what makes Peeping Tom a pioneer. A film that turned the act of watching into the scariest thing of all. Blood and Roses, 1960. Imagine a horror film that feels like drifting through a fever dream, where the plot moves like mist and the images seem to be breathing on their own. That's Blood and Roses, Roger Vadim's take on Sheridan Le Fanu's classic vampire novella Carmilla. Set against the backdrop of a lush European estate, the story follows Carmilla, a beautiful but melancholy young woman who becomes increasingly drawn to her cousin's fiancé. But here, the vampire element is treated less like a monster movie and more like a tragic romantic haunting. Vadim floods the film with soft light, blurred edges, and surreal imagery, fireworks reflecting in water, faces framed in shifting shadows, until you're not sure what's real and what's dream logic. What's striking is how modern it feels in its approach to horror as emotion rather than just plot. Blood and Roses doesn't rely on jump scares. It lets atmosphere seep into your skin. The pacing is hypnotic, almost daring you to get lost in it, and let the right one. In decades later, it treats vampirism as an intimate, almost mournful condition. The film's visual style influenced directors from Dario Argento to Tony Scott, and its focus on mood over mechanics can be seen in everything from The Hunger to Crimson Peak. It's not a roller coaster. It's a slow descent into a velvet-lined coffin you barely realize you've entered. By the end, you're not entirely sure if you want to climb back out. Homicidal, 1961. William Castle built his career on wild gimmicks, buzzers under theater seats, insurance policies in case you died of fright. But with Homicidal, he delivered something that worked even without the tricks. At first glance, it looks like a run-of-the-mill murder mystery, but Castle had a bigger game in mind. The film opens with a young woman named Emily committing a brutal murder in the first 10 minutes. From there, she worms her way into the home of a wealthy family, claiming a strange connection to them. As the story unfolds, Castle lays breadcrumb after breadcrumb, building toward a twist so audacious, he literally stopped the movie for a fright break, so the audience could leave if they couldn't handle it. While Psycho is the obvious cousin, Homicidal pushes the whodunit angle harder, keeping you second-guessing every character. Castle's direction leans into shadowy hallways, locked doors, and suspicious glances, creating a paranoia that feels almost Hitchcockian. The legacy? Its twist structure has been borrowed endlessly, from 70s thrillers to modern horror like Orphan. The idea of flipping a story on its head in the final act and making the audience rethink everything they've seen? Homicidal was doing it while the paint was still wet on the slasher genre. Castle may have been a showman, but here he proved he could be a craftsman too. Strip away the gimmicks, and you've got a sharp, nasty little thriller that knows exactly how to play with your expectations. Circus of Horrors, 1960. Some horror films are about monsters in the shadows. This one puts the monster under the big top and dares you to look away. Circus of Horrors is a gaudy, twisted ride through the world of traveling carnivals, but instead of clowns and elephants, you get a surgeon on the run who decides the circus is the perfect cover for his experiments. Anton Differing plays Dr. Rossiter, a skilled plastic surgeon with a shaky moral compass. After a botched operation forces him to flee, he falls in with a struggling circus troupe. His pitch? He'll fix performers with scars or disfigurements, giving them new faces and new lives. Sounds noble, right? Except when these performers start dying in accidents, the suspicion grows that Rossiter's scalpel isn't retired. It's moonlighting. This film is pure 60s pulp, bold colors, outrageous set pieces, and just enough grim reality to keep you hooked. The circus setting gives it a surreal, slightly unhinged energy, and Differing's icy charm makes him the kind of villain you almost root for, until you remember what he's doing. Modern horror's fascination with killer clowns and creepy carnivals owes a nod to Circus of Horrors. It's part of the DNA that later gave us It Funhouse and the gleefully deranged carnival episode of every horror TV show ever. Beneath the glitter, it's a cautionary tale about vanity, control, and the terrifying places ambition can take you, even if the tent is full and the crowd is cheering. The Brain That Wouldn't Die, 1962. Low budget? Absolutely. Cheesy title? No doubt. But the brain that wouldn't die earns its spot here because it was quietly planting seeds that would sprout into decades of body horror and mad science mayhem. The story is gloriously pulp. A brilliant but arrogant surgeon's girlfriend is decapitated in a car accident. Instead of mourning, he keeps her head alive in his lab while he hunts for the perfect replacement body. Meanwhile, the girlfriend's head, sitting in a tray of bubbling fluid, slowly starts plotting her revenge. Yes, it's campy, but there's an undercurrent of genuine unease. The lab is claustrophobic, the head's whispered manipulations are genuinely creepy, and the final reveal of what's hiding behind a locked door in the basement feels like a monster straight out of a nightmare. Body horror pioneers like David Cronenberg The Fly, Videodrome, and Stuart Gordon Reanimator clearly drank from this well. The film's mix of science, obsession, and grotesque experimentation is the blueprint for playing God stories in horror. Sure, the effects are dated and the acting sometimes wobbles, but there's something deliciously wrong about its central image. A head, conscious and trapped, dreaming of the moment she can turn the tables. Modern horror still chases that kind of messed up visual, and the brain that wouldn't die had it in spades. Matango, 1963. If you thought mushrooms were harmless, Matango will make you reconsider your next stir-fry. Directed by Ishiro Honda, better known for Godzilla, this Japanese gem blends survival horror with surreal body transformation, decades before The Last of Us introduced fungal fear to a whole new audience. The setup is classic. A group of friends on a yachting trip are blown off course and stranded on a fog-shrouded island. Food runs out. Tensions rise. And then they discover the island's only abundant resource, strange, colorful mushrooms. But eating them has side effects. The transformation scenes are slow burn and deeply unsettling. Skin changes texture, faces warp, and eventually the victims become something not quite human. Honda's knack for visual spectacle turns the island into a decaying dreamscape, part tropical paradise, part alien world. What makes Matango endure is its atmosphere. This isn't just about monsters, it's about isolation, paranoia, and the horrifying realization that the enemy might already be inside you. The group's breakdown mirrors the physical corruption, making it as much a psychological horror as a creature feature. Modern survival horror, from The Mist to Annihilation, owes a debt here. Matango took the idea of infection as transformation and wrapped it in a package that was equal parts beautiful and grotesque. Once you've seen it, mushrooms are never just mushrooms again. The Damned, 1963. Some 60s horror crept in through the back door of science fiction, and The Damned is one of those stealth operators. Directed by Joseph Luzzi, this British oddity starts as a seaside gang drama, leather jackets, switchblades, and all, before swerving into something much stranger. It follows an American tourist who gets mixed up with a local gang, only to stumble upon a heavily guarded military facility. Inside are children, pale, polite, and unnervingly calm, who've never seen the outside world. The reason? They're radioactive. Born in secrecy as part of a government experiment, they've been raised underground in preparation for a post-apocalyptic future no one asked for. What begins as a crime story mutates into a paranoid atmospheric nightmare. The beach town's sunny charm gives way to cold bunkers and sterile corridors. The kids are eerie, but not evil. In fact, they're victims, carrying the burden of survival in a dying world. That mix of innocence and danger makes the tension all the sharper. This "what if the government is hiding something awful" thread runs straight through later works like Village of the Damned, The X-Files, and even Stranger Things. The Damned tapped into the unease of the nuclear age, but wrapped it in a story that could just as easily be happening down the road. The real scare isn't a monster. It's realizing the people in charge might be playing games with everyone's future. The Earth Dies Screaming, 1964. The title sounds like pulp paperback hyperbole, but The Earth Dies Screaming delivers a surprisingly tight little slice of post-apocalyptic dread. Directed by Terrence Fisher, better known for his gothic hammer hits, this one trades castles for empty streets and alien invaders. When the film opens, everyone seems to be dead, dropped in place mid-action by some mysterious event. A handful of survivors, all strangers, converge in a deserted English village to figure out what happened. Then the patrols show up, towering silver-suited robots stalking the streets, killing on sight. To make matters worse, the dead don't stay dead. The aliens are reanimating human corpses as zombie-like enforcers. It's a lean, no-frills thriller, clocking in under 70 minutes, but that brevity works in its favor. Fisher keeps the focus on atmosphere and suspicion, with the survivors bickering and mistrusting each other as much as they fear the threat outside. You can see echoes of this setup in Night of the Living Dead, The World's End, and any number of group-trapped-in-one-location horror thrillers. The robots may look retro now, but their slow, relentless patrols are a clear ancestor to everything from Doctor Who's Cybermen to the mechanical hunters in Terminator. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest alien invasion isn't the battle, it's the silence after. Blood and Black Lace, 1964. If you've ever admired a slasher movie's use of rich color, stylish camera moves, and over-the-top murder scenes, you've got Mario Bava's Blood and Black Lace to thank. This Italian giallo wasn't the first of its kind, but it crystallized the formula that would inspire decades of stalk-and-slash cinema. Set in a high-fashion house, the film wastes no time dropping a masked killer into its corridors. Models, designers, and hangers-on get picked off one by one in elaborate, highly stylized set pieces. Bava floods the screen with deep reds, electric blues, and eerie greens, turning violence into something disturbingly beautiful. The killer's faceless mask and black trench coat became a template for countless genre villains. And the murder sequences? They're creative, methodical, and framed like macabre art, a far cry from the quick, messy kills in most earlier horror. Beyond the visuals, the film's mystery structure, suspects everywhere, clues dripping out in small doses, would be adopted by everything from Halloween to Scream. You're not just here for the kills, you're piecing together a puzzle while admiring the craftsmanship. At the time, Blood and Black Lace was dismissed by some critics as style over substance. Today, that style is the substance. It proved horror could be glamorous without losing its edge, and its influence is still strutting down the genre's runway. Dark Intruder, 1965. Sometimes the most interesting horror films start life as something else entirely. Dark Intruder was originally meant to be a pilot for a supernatural detective TV series. But when the network passed, it was released as a standalone feature. At just under an hour, it's a brisk, pulpy slice of occult mystery with a charismatic lead and a whiff of Lovecraft. Set in 19th century San Francisco, the story follows Brett Kingsford, a wealthy, witty investigator with a knack for sniffing out the paranormal. When a string of brutal murders baffles the police, Kingsford starts pulling at threads that lead to ancient artifacts, arcane rituals, and something decidedly inhuman lurking in the city. What makes Dark Intruder stand out is its blend of detective story and supernatural horror. It plays like a mashup of Sherlock Holmes and The Mummy, with the foggy streets and gas lamps providing a perfect stage for things that go bump in the night. The production design is lush for what was essentially a TV project, and the pacing keeps the mystery unfolding just fast enough to keep you hooked. While it never got the series it was aiming for, Dark Intruder feels like a prototype for paranormal investigation stories we now take for granted. Kolchak, The Night Stalker, The X-Files, even Constantine. It's proof that genre blending was alive and well in the 60s, quietly laying the groundwork for decades of supernatural sleuthing. Quartermass and The Pit, 1967. British sci-fi horror didn't get much smarter or stranger than Quartermass and The Pit. Based on Nigel Neal's hit BBC serial, this Hammer film begins with a seemingly routine discovery. Construction workers in London uncover strange skeletal remains and a mysterious metallic object buried deep underground. Enter Professor Quartermass, who quickly suspects this isn't just a piece of military hardware. As scientists and the military spar over the find, the object starts to awaken, triggering psychic disturbances, visions of insect-like creatures, and violent riots in the streets. The deeper Quartermass digs, the more unsettling the truth becomes. Humanity might have been influenced, even engineered by alien visitors millions of years ago. What's remarkable is how seamlessly Quartermass and The Pit blend speculative science fiction with supernatural-style horror. The buried object functions like a haunted artifact, unleashing fear and chaos, much like a cursed relic in a ghost story. But the explanation is chillingly rational within the film's logic. The influence is wide-reaching. Prince of Darkness, The Mist, and Event Horizon all borrow from its scientific investigation turns cosmic nightmare blueprint. It's smart, tense, and full of ideas that still feel fresh. By the end, you're left with a bigger question. If this is our origin story, what else might be buried under our feet? So there you have it. 13 horror films from the 1960s that didn't just spook audiences in their day, they quietly rewired the genre for everything that came after. Some are stylish, some are scrappy, but all of them have DNA you can trace straight into modern scares. Which of these have you seen, and which ones are you adding to your watch list? Drop your picks in the comments, hit like if you discovered something new, and subscribe for more deep dives into the corners of film history where the real chills hide.